Hi, this is Martin, and would just like to do a little bit of a story as to how I got here on this particular episode. We were not able to go to Sunday Mass in the Northeast as we had a snowstorm and our driveway was not cleared at all. So we watched the Mass at 10 o'clock at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Cardinal Dolan gave the homily. But what was interesting is that the homily was on a saint that I had never heard about or knew nothing about in any way, and her feast day was the day before, February 8th. The person is Saint Josephine Bakhita, and just do the spelling of that, Bakhita. Josephine endured immense suffering when she was a young child, age about 10, until she was taken in by an Italian council's family in her late teens. Her older sister was kidnapped by a gang of Sudanese gangsters, and the same gangsters kidnapped Josephine about 2 years later. She witnessed the brutality of this group who raped her mother and tortured and killed her father. She was constantly tortured and had 116 marks on her body from their assaults and beatings. I've done 2 previous episodes on people that were doorkeepers to either chapels or churches. In this particular instance, it's to a school, because I find them incredibly interesting. Josephine is obviously number 3. There is something about a doorkeeper. Essentially, there is no opportunity for pompous attitudes. You are truly a servant. People come to you and you do nothing other than open the door, and importantly, you have a chance to interact with them in a positive manner. A friendly greeting, good to see you again, a handshake, a compliment, or simply, thank you for coming. We've had, until recently, in our parish, a priest with the Congregation of Holy Cross that always was intrigued that the only saint from his congregation was a doorkeeper, a Saint Andre Bessette in Montreal. The interesting thing is this order is extremely known for its intellectual side with Notre Dame University in South Bend, Indiana, and other prestigious schools. But that was Josephine Bakhita. She touched so many people's lives just by being a doorkeeper, with a friendly smile, a touch on the head to a little child, or her big, brown, welcoming African Sudanese eyes. Mother Josephine Bakhita was born in Sudan in 1869 and died in Schio, Vicenza, Italy in 1947. This African flower, who knew the anguish of kidnapping and slavery, bloomed marvelously in Italy in response to God's grace with the Daughters of Charity. In Schio, Vicenza, where she spent so many years of her life, everyone still calls her our Black Mother. The process for the cause of canonization began 12 years after her death, and on December 1st, 1978, the Church proclaimed the decree of the heroic practice of all virtues. Divine Providence, which cares for the flowers of the field and the birds of the air, guided the Sudanese slave through innumerable and unspeakable sufferings to human freedom and to the freedom of faith, and finally, to the consecration of her whole life to God. Bakhita was not the name she received from her parents at birth. The fright and the terrible experiences she went through made her forget the name she was given by her parents. Bakhita, which means fortunate, was a name given to her by her kidnappers, sold and resold in the markets of El Obeid and of Khartoum in Sudan. She experienced the humiliations and sufferings of slavery, both physical and moral. In the capital of Sudan, Bakhita was bought by an Italian consul, Callisto Legnani. For the first time since the day she was kidnapped, she realized with pleasant surprise that no one used the lash when giving her orders. Instead, she was treated in a loving and cordial way. In the consul's residence, Bakhita experienced peace, warmth, and moments of joy, even though veiled by nostalgia for her own family, whom perhaps she had lost forever. Political situations forced the council to leave for Italy. Bakhita asked and obtained permission to go with him and with a friend of his, a certain Augusto Michieli. On arrival in Genoa, Mr. Legnani, pressured by the request of Mr. Michieli's wife, consented to leave Bakhita with them. She followed the new family, which settled in Ziangio, near Murano, Veneto. When their daughter, Mamina, was born, Bakhita became her babysitter and friend. The acquisition and management of a big hotel in Suacan on the Red Sea forced Mrs. Michieli to move to Suacan to help her husband. Meanwhile, on the advice of her administrator, Illuminato Cecchini, Mamina and Bakhita were entrusted to the Canossian sisters in Venice. It was there that Bakhita came to know about God, whom she had experienced in her heart without knowing who he was ever since she was a child. Seeing the sun, the moon, and the stars, I said to myself, who could be the master of these beautiful things? And I felt a great desire to see him, to know him, and to pay him homage. After several months in the catechumenate, Bakhita received the sacraments of Christian initiation and was given the new name Josephine. It was January 9th, 1890. She did not know how to express her joy that day. Her big and expressive eyes sparkled, revealing deep emotions. From then on, she was often seen kissing the baptismal font and saying, "Here, I became a daughter of God." With each new day, she became more aware of who this God was, whom she now knew and loved, who had led her to him through mysterious ways, holding her by the hand. When Mrs. Michieli returned from Africa to take back her daughter and Bakhita, the latter, with unusual firmness and courage, expressed her desire to remain with the Canossian sisters and to serve that God who had shown her so many proofs of his love. The young African, who by then had come of age, enjoyed the freedom of choice which the Italian law ensured. Bakhita remained in the catechumenate, where she experienced the call to be a religious and to give herself to the Lord. On December 8, 1896, Josephine Bakhita was consecrated forever to God, whom she called with a sweet expression, the Master. For another 50 years, the humble daughter of charity, a true witness of the love of God, lived in the community in Schio, engaged in various services such as cooking, serving, embroidery, and attending to the door. When she was on duty at the door, she would gently lay her hands on the heads of the children who daily attended the Canossian schools and caress them. Her amiable voice, which had the inflection and rhythm of the music of her country, was pleasing to the little ones, comforting to the poor and suffering, and encouraging for those who knocked at the door. Her humility, her simplicity, and her constant smile won the hearts of all the citizens. Her sisters in the community esteemed her for her inalterable sweet nature, her exquisite goodness, and her deep desire to make the Lord known. Be good, love the Lord, pray for those who do not know him. What a great grace it is to know God. As she grew older, she experienced long, painful years of sickness. Mother Bakhita continued to witness to faith, goodness, and Christian hope. To those who visited her and asked her how she was, she would respond with a smile, "As the Master desires." During her agony, she relived the terrible days of slavery, and more than once she begged the nurse who assisted her, "Please loosen the chains. They are heavy." It was Mary Most Holy who freed her from all her pain. Her last words were, Our Lady, and her final smile testified to her encounter with the Mother of the Lord. Mother Bakhita breathed her last on February 8, 1947. She was about 81, at the Canossian convent, Schio, surrounded by the sisters. A crowd quickly gathered at the convent to have a last look at their mother, Moretta, and to ask for protection from heaven. The fame of her sanctity has spread to all the continents, and many are those who receive graces through her intercession. So I want to thank you very much for taking the time to listen today, and farewell until the next time.